heart of where innovation, money, and power collide in Silicon Valley and beyond. This is Bloomberg Technology with Caroline Hyde and Ed Ludlow.
Live from New York, this is Bloomberg Technology. Now we get to DirecTV and the Dish program to become the biggest pay TV provider in the United States. Plus, Beijing steps up pressure on domestic companies to ditch Nvidia chips, and California Governor Gavin Newsom blocks a proposed AI safety bill. Senator Wiener the bill. But first, let's check in on these markets at the moment, because as I battle perhaps some technical issues with my microphone, we're currently seeing the Nasdaq 100 off by 0.25% at the moment. Look, we're all awaiting Fed Chair Powell, what he will be saying regarding the economy, post, of course, those Fed cuts. We're looking at the Golden Dragon Index over in China, though, up another 4%. Tech stocks on fire amid the stimulus and, of course, this feeling of FOMO continuing to perpetuate in the market. We are the highest on these Chinese-related names in more than a year. Look at some individual movers, though, because we have got a merger Monday on our hands, and a lot of stocks are being impacted. AT&T, for one, only up about 0.1%, but this has been long in the making. DirecTV and Dish combining to create the biggest pay TV provider in the United States. AT&T, as part of the deal, well, it's selling its 70% stake in DirecTV to TPG. Meanwhile, that earns it $7.6 billion. EchoStar, as you'll see, under pressure. The owner of Dish and Sling is basically dodging bankruptcy here, according to Bloomberg Intelligence, by offloading the debt associated with pay TV assets, and is set to sell more shares itself. Let's discuss all of this with Michelle Davis, who throughout has been following this deal. You take a victory lap because you're ahead of the curve on this. This is why AT&T isn't moving that much, because we had anticipated its offloading of DirecTV. But just remind us what they're creating here by merging the two companies.
So, as you just said, this deal has been a long time coming, and there's a lot happening here. The news all came out this morning through a series of 5-6 press releases, filings. And what's happening is that Dish and DirecTV are going to combine. DirecTV is acquiring Dish to form, if it gets approved, the biggest paid TV provider in the U.S. And the way they're doing that is DirecTV is paying $1 in equity and then assuming $10 billion of Dish debt in order to acquire the business. As part of that, though, DirecTV has to get Dish bondholders to agree to take a haircut on some of their debt. So if this goes through, it will mean a stronger balance sheet, behind those lenders that are agreeing to this, but the bondholders have to agree to take that haircut.
And that is why some of these bond prices are significantly under pressure today. It's not just the stock of EchoStar, for example. EchoStar, meanwhile, is going more into the infrastructure side, into the 5G side, and into selling about $5 billion worth of stock. That's why its shares fall on the day there are some of the outstanding debt that's involved in this debt exchange. But why then AT&T exit its holding of DirecTV? Does it not see the future potential of a bigger deal?
So this is all part of a bigger theme that we're seeing in M&A and in corporate America, where companies are increasingly looking to simplify their businesses. AT&T has done a bit of a 360. Years ago, they got into the content game, and you'll remember a couple years ago, they spun out and sold Warner Brothers to Discovery. Now with DirecTV, they're looking to exit that. And they say that this is all about them wanting to focus on what their core is, which is wireless, broadband. They don't see, value in content the way that they had before. And under TPG, with this JV that they have, DirecTV has done really well because TPG has been able to cut costs. And so the thought is maybe it's better in their hands than a split, deal.
I like the fact that you're saying this is all part of a trend to simplify, because you're also on the byline for Verizon's story today, where we're seeing a $3.3 billion deal for it to basically sell and then lease back access to its towers. Why do that for a Verizon?
So it's a way for Verizon to get some cash. They announced a deal themselves a couple weeks ago to buy Frontier, which is a big broadband internet player. And we're seeing just a big theme of the wireless players tapping out on kind of, cell phone and seeing we need to find ways to get more customers. And the way to do that is by offering internet access. So this is a way for them to pay for that without, boosting their leverage as much. It gives them a little bit of cash.
Michelle, she's been busy. We appreciate it. Meanwhile, let's talk about this in the broader market context. Empower's chief investment strategist, Marta Norton, is here for more. And Marta, look, we do have a feeling of M&A Monday on our hands. Are we going to see more deals go through as we see rates get lower?
Well, listen, I mean, we have seen some pickup in deals this year, and I think one of the challenges has been higher rates. And so the expectation that, as the Fed enters the definitive cutting cycle, we're going to see some shifts broadly, and that can impact the M&A environment as well. There's also the regulatory angle, and of course, getting deals through. And that's been harder in recent years. And so that remains something that, is something that investors and companies are going to have to continue to contend with. But certainly lower rates is a bit of a tailwind.
What's interesting is many felt perhaps M&A and indeed IPOs, dare we say it, are all going to be held back until post the political anxiety that is the US election. That doesn't seem to be holding it back right now. Is that your view, Marta?
Well, I do think that regulatory impact has been felt. That doesn't mean that companies aren't going to engage in deals when it makes strategic sense. I think that's what we're seeing with the Dish DirecTV deal. But I do think that there's potentially been less activity than there otherwise would be. And so I think that as we turn the elective corner and start to have some clarity on what that looks like, we may start to see a pickup in activity on the M&A front.
What about activity and ownership of big tech right now? Because we're down on the day on the NASDAQ. There is talk that hedge funds are selling out of technology names to get into, lo and behold, Chinese companies. How are we seeing that play out in terms of people's desire to stay committed to the Magnificent Seven?
It's such an interesting question because a lot of times when we're talking about the environment that we're in, there's really been two drivers of returns in 2024. Of course, there's been the AI theme, and of course, that's really benefited the big tech space. And there's also been the soft landing theme. And now we're adding the cutting cycle to the mix. So I think that's really within the US broadening out the trade, not necessarily meaning that folks need to abandon big tech. I mean, lower rates aren't necessarily bad for big tech, but it certainly brings other areas like the small cap area into the front of investors' minds. Now, what's happening in China is so fascinating because this has been an area that has been under pressure. It's had multiple false dawns. And now, as Bloomberg has reported so clearly, there's the monetary and the fiscal side coming together to push these stocks higher. And so I think that's giving a lot of investor enthusiasm to assets that have been really depressed. You can find some very healthy big tech names in China, but the overhang there has just been made it very difficult for investors to want to get involved.
We've already seen the FOMO kick in, the rallying of the names we currently have on the screen, the Alibabas, the JD.coms, the Baidus. Is there still juice to go here, or do you wait to see how bigger impact the stimulus actually has from a fundamental perspective?
I'd argue that the valuations are still there. I mean, when you take a look at something like Crane Shares ETF that's tracking the China market, and you look at where it peaked in February 2021, it was around 130, and it's come down all the way down to about 18 at one point, now in the 30s. It potentially won't go all the way back up to something like 130, but you can see a little bit room left on the valuation side because the sentiment has been so bleak. I mean, there's been numerous sell-side research pieces out over the past several years saying that this is a no-go space. And so now that you have kind of the support for the demand side, I'm not saying there aren't still issues, there are plenty of issues left, but I think this takes at least some of the concerns away from investors' minds.
And we have had such a US is the only game in town for technology trade. Is that still the case?
Well, it's hard to find similar opportunities from kind of a financial resilience or health or dominance perspective in what you have in Silicon Valley. There is a lot of uniqueness to those types of names. But the closest corollary that I see really is in China, where you have some of these similar types of companies with really healthy balance sheets. So I think that this is the competitive trade, but of course they have, concerns around the regulatory environment. There are geopolitical risks. There are a number of other things that kind of spoil the apple cart a little bit there. But from an asset perspective, they're pretty competitive.
I just want to double click on that in terms of regulatory concerns? Because there are actually geopolitical regulatory concerns as well, with China pushing back against Nvidia chips. That's benefited Chinese chip makers today. We're going to talk about it much more in a moment, Marta. But how much are you factoring in for your investors the idea that China-US tensions will continue?
I mean, I think that is one of the kind of exogenous events that's out there, and it affects, of course, tech, but it also affects the broader market. And, we have talks of tariffs and the like as well. So there's a lot of questions around kind of the cooperation of different countries and how they'll play well. And in something like AI and thinking about kind of the security risk, how that factors into things. So I think there is, something of when folks are thinking about these assets, to think about the valuation and whether it's accounting for that type of risk. And as we're taking a look at big tech today, even post-summer storm, I'd argue the valuations are a bit high, and they're not really taking into account some of these outside events that could be problematic for some of these companies.
Empower's Chief Investment Strategist, Marta Norton. Great to get your take. Thank you. Now, coming up, tensions rising in the Middle East between Israel and Hezbollah. Why Hezbollah manned drones could be the next key threat. Meanwhile, we push ahead also to what is happening in New York. Right here, right now, you're hearing from Governor Kathy Hochul speaking about the state's preparations ahead of potential East Coast port disruption amid looming strikes. You can watch this on Live Go if you've got the terminal. We'll bring you any headlines. This is Bloomberg Technology.
We're working closely with the industry. I will also say that the industries...
Washington, President Biden now making remarks on the administration's response to Hurricane Helene. Let's listen in.
About the broad and devastating impacts of Hurricane Helene. It's not just a catastrophic storm, it's a historic, history-making storm. The entire Southeast and Appalachia. Damage from the hurricane stretches across at least 10 states. Winds over 120 miles an hour in some places. Storm surges up to 15 feet and record flooding. Communities are devastated. Loved ones waiting, not sure if their loved ones are okay, as they can't contact them because there's no cell phone connections. Many more folks displaced with no idea when they'll be able to be returned to the home, if ever, if there's a home to return to. So we're keeping them all in our prayers, and all the lives lost, and those particularly unaccounted for. There's nothing like wondering, is my husband, wife, son, daughter, mother, father alive? And many more who remain without electricity, water, food, and communications. Whose homes and businesses have washed away in an instant. I want them to know we're not leaving until the job is done. I also want you to know I'm committed to traveling to the impacted areas as soon as possible, but I've been told that it would be disruptive if I did it right now. We will not do that at the risk of diverting or delaying any of the response assets needed to deal with this crisis. My first responsibility is to get all the help needed to those impacted areas. And I expect to be there, excuse me, I have a cold. I expect to be there later this week. I and my team are in constant contact with the governors, mayors, and local leaders. The head of FEMA, Deanne Griswold, is on the ground now in North Carolina. She's going to stay in Asheville and Appalachia region for the foreseeable future. There's been reports of over 100 dead and consequence of this storm, and there are reports of up to 600 people unaccounted for because they can't be contacted. God willing, they're alive, but there's no way to contact them again because of the lack of cell phone coverage. I've directed my team to provide every available resource as fast as possible to your communities to rescue, recover, and to begin rebuilding. In addition to FEMA, it includes the Federal Communications Commission to help establish communications capability, the National Guard, the Army Corps of Engineers, and the Department of Defense are going to provide all the resources at its disposal to rescue and assist in clearing debris and delivering life-saving supplies. So far, that's over 3,600 personnel deployed. That number is growing by the day. I quickly approved requests from governors of Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, Virginia, and Alabama for an emergency declaration. And I approved additional requests for the governors of North Carolina, Florida, South Carolina, and for a disaster declaration to pay for debris removal and provide financial assistance directly to survivors. FEMA and the Small Business Administration are there to help the residents whose homes and businesses were literally destroyed, washed away, or blown away. And the federal search and rescue teams have been working side by side with state and local officials and partners in very treacherous conditions to find those who are missing. And they'll not rest until everyone's accounted for. I want to thank all the first responders and everyone who's been working around the clock. One of the brave teams who's volunteered to be there is from San Diego County Fire Department, set to travel all the way from California to North Carolina to help. But on their way, they were in a terrible car accident in Louisiana. We pray for their full recovery, but it was a bad accident. We know there's more to do, and we'll continue to surge resources, including food, water, communications, and life-saving equipment. We'll be there, as I said before, and I mean it, as long as it takes to finish this job. Let me close with this. As president, I've seen firsthand the devastating toll that disasters like this take on families and communities. I've been on the ground in many disaster areas since I've been president. Excuse me, and I've heard dozens of stories from survivors about how it feels to be left with nothing, not even knowing where or when to get back on track. I'm here to tell every single survivor in these impacted areas that we will be there with you as long as it takes. For the sake of yourselves, and your families, I urge everyone returning to their communities and home to listen to the local officials and follow all safety instructions. Take this seriously. Please be safe. Your nation has your back, and the Biden-Harris administration will be there until the job is done. God bless you all, and I'm thinking of those that are still wondering where your loved ones are. Thank you.
We need to supplemental to help the people in the Southeast, Mr. President.
Say again?
We need to ask Congress for a supplemental.
That's my expectation, yes.
You know roughly how much you're thinking?
Not yet. This is a historic storm. It's devastating. They've never seen anything like this before. And some of them are back-to-back, 3 storms in a row. So it's really, really devastating.
Would you consider asking Congress to come back for a special session to pass a supplemental?
That is something I may have to request, but no decision has been made yet.
Do you have a sense of where you'll go when you are able to go, sir?
Yes, I told the governor of North Carolina to go down, and I expect to be down there by Wednesday or Thursday. It would be clear for me to go. You guys have traveled with me. You know, there's an entourage. This can be disruptive.
Is there a mistake for President Trump to be down there today in Georgia? Is that disruptive?
I don't have any idea.
On another issue, on the other side of the world in the Middle East, it's our understanding...
I'm going to stick with this.
What's that?
I'm going to stick with this subject, but go ahead.
Well, just the fact that Israel may be now launching a limited operation into Lebanon. Are you aware of that? Are you comfortable with their plans?
I'm more aware than you might know, and I'm comfortable with them stopping. We should have a ceasefire now. Thank you.
Do you expect Iran to retaliate?
On the hurricane, Mr. President, why weren't you and Vice President Harris here in Washington commanding this weekend?
I was commanding. I was on the phone for at least 2 hours yesterday and the day before as well. I command. It's called a telephone. And all my security people.
Is it not important for the country to see?
President Biden there discussing Hurricane Helene. Let's go now to Washington for more. Kayleigh Lyons in D.C. What did you make of the comments, Kayleigh?
Well, Caroline, he obviously was addressing his desire to go visit some of these affected areas, but we heard the president say he does not wish to do so until he knows that visit won't be disrupted. He said he is committed to traveling to those areas, is expecting to visit later on this week, so we'll have to await a date for that. But in the meantime, the president saying that he has spoken to governors of some of the states affected, including Governor Brian Kemp in Georgia and Roy Cooper in North Carolina, noting that he has made disaster declarations in 3 states and an emergency declarations in 7 states, which was also interesting to hear Joe Biden talking about the potential need for supplemental funding, because, of course, as we're looking at a death toll north of 100, there is also potentially tens of billions of dollars in damages that might need to be addressed. And the president did say he does expect they will need to make a supplemental funding request to Congress, noting that Congress is currently on recess until mid-November after the election. The president was asked there whether he might need to call Congress back for a special session to address that supplemental funding. He said they might have to make that request, though that is not official yet. And of course, President Biden is making these remarks after getting criticized, as we heard that last question of him there. Why wasn't he in Washington over the weekend? He was in Delaware. Donald Trump pointed that out at a rally yesterday or this weekend in Pennsylvania, saying that Joe Biden was sleeping in Delaware rather than being present for this crisis. Also talking about Kamala Harris fundraising in California rather than being in a zone. But of course, both Harris and Biden are expected to visit affected areas this week.
Kaylee Lines, we appreciate it. Thank you. Now, let's turn our attention to US and China now. Bloomberg has learned that Beijing is stepping up pressure on domestic companies to ditch Nvidia processors for local alternatives. That has sent shares of China chipmaker Cailifornia Technologies absolutely soaring today. Let's discuss more with Bloomberg's Mackenzie Hawkins, who helped break this story on Friday evening around the pushback against Nvidia. This is today's market reaction. Mackenzie, just remind us as to why they are trying to curtail these not the most powerful chips from Nvidia, that's for sure.
So Beijing for years has been aiming for self-sufficiency in semiconductors, which are the critical electronic building blocks of every advanced technology, including artificial intelligence. And Chinese chip makers have been trying to make strides against their foreign rivals, but have struggled to keep up. Nvidia's chips are still the gold standard, even the slightly less powerful ones that the company is allowed to sell to China under U.S. restrictions. So Beijing, on the one hand, wants to prop up these domestic companies and encourage Chinese AI developers to use Chinese chips. On the other hand, they don't want to handicap these Chinese AI startups, so they're not fully banning them from buying the best chips on the market, which are Nvidia's, but saying, if you can, please buy local.
Interestingly, I think caught on camera was Jensen Huang on Friday as well in Washington. He's doing all he can, he says, to support sales in China.
China is an incredibly important market for Nvidia and pretty much every other chip maker. The U.S. restricted sales of advanced chips made with any type of American technology to China in 2022 and has been increasingly cracking down on those sales over the past couple of years. But Nvidia and other companies responded by trying to design new chips for the Chinese market, which the U.S. Commerce Department then cracked down on those, and Nvidia designed even less powerful chips. This is still a huge electronics market. Obviously, an enormous amount of manufacturing happens there, and companies are trying to abide by restrictions from Washington while maintaining access to a critical customer base.
Mackenzie Hawkins, thanks so much. Meanwhile, sticking with China, manufacturers there selling the fewest electric cars in 18 months to customers across Europe. Registrations actually falling by nearly half in August from a year earlier. Bloomberg's Craig Trudell here for us from London. This is a continuing theme, Craig.
Yeah, that's right. I think this is a case where we still have yet to see tariffs come into place and actually be implemented. There's been a provisional additional charge put on vehicles, but it won't actually be charged until November. So, this is maybe a little bit of an early taste of the impact that these additional tariffs could have on Chinese manufacturers and, international car companies like Tesla that are facing, additional tariffs as a result of the fact that the EU is concerned about, just how much lower costs are in China and how much, companies exporting out of China maybe have a leg up over local manufacturers.
MG, a brand that had a lot of success, that's feeling the heat. BYD as well. We're currently looking at some American auto companies as well, though, because all of this comes in the context, Craig, of a very tough environment for automakers. Stellantis, the latest today.
Yeah, that's right. And Stellantis, the profit warning today was really dramatic. They went from seeing a more than 10% profit margin for the year to a 5 to 7.5% margin. For them to lower that and also really dramatically reduce their expectation for free cash flow. Initially, they were seeing that to be positive. Now they're saying a negative $5 billion to negative $10 billion. That is really something that has caught the market off guard. I think it was, well understood that this company was having some real issues, and particularly with their inventory getting a bit out of whack in North America. They've been making way more cars than they have demand for, but for them to come out and really have this sort of clearing event and warn in a very dramatic way, I think has really alarmed investors and analysts today.
The context, thank you, from Craig Trudell. Meanwhile, coming up, We're going to be joined by Arkestro CEO Neil Lustig for his insights on the potential East Coast port strikes, what the impact is likely to be on the supply chain more broadly. We'll bring you that next. This is Bloomberg Technology.
I urge US, MX, and the ILA to come to an agreement that respects workers, that ensures the flow of commerce through our ports, and the stakes are very high. The potential for disruption is significant.
New York Governor Kathy Hochul earlier this hour, union workers along the East Coast and Gulf Coast ports threatening strike tomorrow over a new contract. Bloomberg's Danny Berger joins us now from right outside Newark Shipping Port in New Jersey on the latest. And Danny, we're hearing actually in a Facebook post from the ILA that USMX continues to block the path forward to a settlement, they currently are saying, and this coming from the International Longshoremen's Association. It feels like a deal is not near done.
No, they are still a long ways away. And given that post, it seems like the strike will likely be on 12:01 a.m., 1 minute past midnight on Tuesday, is when the contract expires and when a strike will happen. 45,000 members to this union. That is some 36 ports. It's about half of the goods imported into the U.S. The sticking points are two very big ones, Caroline. It is one, pay. They want some 80% pay rise over the next 6 years. They say the current offer that they are being given is, quote, stingy. They also want language drafted into the contract that prevents more automation on these ports. Automation, I should say, that is very prevalent elsewhere. It is in Asia. It is in places like Amsterdam, but they don't want that over fear of losing their job. So the head of the Longshoremen's Association, the union representing them, saying that come Tuesday morning, they are ready to, in his words, awaken a sleeping giant.
And we saw that awakened on the West Coast but a year or so ago, Danny, and a lot of that came down to technology, to innovation. As we say, Alliance of Container Carriers, Direct Employers and Port Association, basically the United States Maritime Alliance is who they're up against. Anything from that side in terms of their talks with the ILA?
Well, I mean, this is a problem that we've heard from many unions. I mean, you can even refer to what happened in the Hollywood strike over fear of technology. Now, when it comes to the West Coast, it is a separate union. So these talks are different. Now, you could look at the West Coast and say, look, this is a model for how talks can go, and even abroad of how talks can go to incorporate automation. Essentially, they want guarantees put in that workers will be protected. That's the kind of language they want if more automation does come. Now, there has been some hope that maybe if goods can't come through the East Coast, they can come through the West Coast, which is still open. Unfortunately, the capacity there is not enough. And the head of the unions on the East Coast has said that there's been solidarity and that some of the workers there won't accept the shipments coming in. So, yes, it is that sticking point of technology. But many people say, look, this is a tide that cannot be stopped. It is automation that is necessary. It makes the job easier, quicker, and yes, some jobs will be lost, but it's that reskilling that's really necessary to make sure that that doesn't happen and people stay employed even if there is automation.
Danny Berger, live from New York, we thank you. Meanwhile, let's talk more about automation technology helping us in this current supply chain issue. Neil Lustig joins us. He's the CEO of Arkestro. It's a predictive procurement platform powered by AI game theory, which helps companies proactively reroute those shipments and secure alternative suppliers before, well, perhaps these disruptions are going to be felt. I have a feeling you're getting a few calls.
Yeah, it's a tough time to be a supply chain executive this week, and I think most of our customers right now are focused on alternatives. Right there, where are we going to find new routes? How are we going to move things through air? This is something they would have been focused on for a few days already. At this point, if you haven't figured this out, you're a bit late. And longer term, your job is to figure out how to make yourself more resilient. Software like Arkestro can't predict black swan events like this, but they can help you become more adaptable, respond much faster. So our customers can reach out to hundreds and thousands of contractors, suppliers, in an order of magnitude faster. And that really, this is what this is about, is from our customers' perspective, is adapting to the issue. Our customers aren't going to be involved in the labor discussion, but how do you adapt? and adjust quicker than you did in the past, and more importantly, quicker than your competitors.
Will they likely, though, be feeling money lost? We're expecting a big economic impact from this.
Oh, absolutely. There's no question this is going to be damaging to everyone. There isn't enough alternative, there aren't enough alternative suppliers or alternative channels. There's just not the capacity. So this makes it twice as important for you to be the first one to move.
Yes.
And if you move, as I said, this is kind of like the joke with the bear in the woods. You don't have to outrun the bear, you have to outrun your buddy. And if you can adapt faster than your competitors, you can find those alternative routes. You can arrange air shipping for critical imports.
Yes.
I mean, it's a short-term bit, but speed matters.
Well, let's talk about the speed and how machine learning or how game theory are aiding your clients. What puts them able to front run here?
Right. So AI is good at a few things in the enterprise market. AI is good at sifting through large amounts of data, and AI is good at automating things that otherwise a human being would have had to do, like reaching out and managing a quote process for finding an alternative shipper or finding an alternative supplier. And so being able to take that and shrink that time to 20% of what it was before means you can now do this just more, 5 times as much as you could before. Our customers are finding, for example, we had a customer who a few months ago went out to the entire North American trucking market at once. 4,000 lanes, 350 carriers.
Wow.
A job that would have taken 9 months and 12 people was collapsed into 3 people, 3 weeks. And so this is the kind of nimbleness that AI gets you broadly and what Arkestro is delivering for our customers in the supply chain.
How do you respond to a sudden wave of demand on your end? Does anything get stressed or stretched? Do you have to think about investing in your own platform?
So we're lucky. We use a set of cloud-based platforms that do what's called auto-scaling. So our infrastructure is able to expand and contract dynamically. So for us, this is actually not a crisis. It's an opportunity.
This is what you're built for, Arkestro.
Yes.
CEO Neil Lustig, great to have you here on a very busy day. Meanwhile, coming up, we're going to be joined by California Senator Scott Wiener to weigh in on the AI safety bill, which was just vetoed by California Governor Gavin Newsom. That's next. This is Bloomberg Technology.
This is an AI PC, a new generation of personal computer with specialized processors for AI tasks. It also has an AI assistant software that's pre-installed. We tried out a Dell XPS 13 and a Microsoft Surface Pro. They both run Windows 11 on Qualcomm chips, a combination of CPU, GPU, and NPU, or Neural Processing Unit. That's the new bit. There's also a button or key specifically for Microsoft's Copilot. Tap and boop, up comes the AI assistant. Copilot acts like a chatbot, fielding questions. It creates images and it can quickly draft schedules or summarize dense text. In web browsers, Copilot answers questions about a web page or summarizes news articles. The AI tech still has a lot of limitations, but battery life, that was great in both PCs. 3 or 4 days on a full charge, chatting with Copilot, rendering images, even if you push the limits with gaming in the Dell's case. That's thanks to Snapdragon's NPU. It can run 45 trillion operations per second, so multiple AI apps simultaneously without a hit to performance or battery life. Like PCs of old, there's gremlins, but on the whole, it does what you'd want from a PC. There's still a question: how do AI PCs change how we work and play?
More on AI, because California Governor Gavin Newsom has vetoed what would have become one of the most comprehensive policies governing the safety of AI in the United States. The bill, which would have held AI developers accountable for any severe harm caused by their technologies, it drew strong criticism from the likes of OpenAI, VC firm Andreessen Horowitz, and many more, who warned it could stall innovation in the states. Democratic California Senator Scott Wiener, who introduced the bill, called Newsom's veto a setback and a missed opportunity. In a statement on X, says, quote, "We are all less safe as a result." He joins us now for more, along with Bloomberg's Shireen Ghaffari. And Senator, I start with you. Your reaction, disappointment, but why less safe?
Sure. Yes, the governor's veto was very disappointing. This was a very thoughtful, focused piece of legislation that would have addressed catastrophic risk from only the largest, most powerful models. And what it did was very basic. It would require the largest AI companies, largest tech companies, to perform safety evaluations on massive, powerful models before they release them, and to be able to shut down those models if something goes awry. They've all committed to perform these safety evaluations, but instead of just trust us, we want to put it in statute. So there was nothing extreme or unreasonable about this.
Right.
And the veto, unfortunately, sends a very bad message about the future of AI safety.
And Senator, what do you make of Governor Newsom's rationale for vetoing this bill? He said that he's worried it would provide a false sense of security, that smaller models could be exempt. We also saw Nancy Pelosi put out a statement about how she's happy the bill has been vetoed. What do you make of their rationales?
Respectfully to the governor, first of all, at least the governor acknowledged that these risks are real, because some of the opposition throughout were saying, oh, this is just science fiction. It's not science fiction. These are very, very real, tangible risks that these models could help facilitate. So the governor did acknowledge that, which is good. I didn't fully understand the governor's veto message. It said, well, the bill is too broad, but the bill is also too narrow. So the veto message, it's unclear what the governor actually wants. We'll see with this working group that he's setting up what comes out of that. But I and many others are committed to really moving forward to support AI innovation, because AI can make the world a better place, but trying to get ahead of the risks posed by this very powerful technology.
Right, and talking about that working group, so the governor has said that he's consulting with outside experts, including Fei Li and some others, to potentially come up with guardrails, maybe even new legislation, it sounds like, in a future session. What do you make of that? Do you think those are the right people for this group? Some people have brought up that Fei Li does have funding for a startup from Andreessen Horowitz, the VC firm, which has been very vocal against SB 1047. What do you make of that group? Are they the right people to be addressing this? Well, they he put Tino Cuellar on there, who's a former California Supreme Court justice who I admire greatly. And I have a lot of respect for Fei Li. She's an incredibly smart, talented person. It's also important that folks who technologists who supported the bill also be involved, because we had some of the greatest minds in AI who were supporting the bill. I hope that they are included as well.
Right. Senator, what of the influence, though, of those that were against? What of the lobbying? Did it make an impact?
Well, it did not have significant impact in the legislative process. The legislature, with very strong votes in both the Senate and the Assembly, passed this. So Democrats overwhelmingly supported this legislation, despite the intense lobbying by large tech companies and by large venture capital firms. The governor went through his own process, and I am confident was hearing a lot, both support and opposition, and ultimately made his decision. I strongly disagree with the governor's decision, but again, at least he acknowledged that these risks are real and that they're not made up.
Will you reintroduce SB 1047 in the next session?
We're going to evaluate next steps. We certainly want to engage with the governor and with others. This issue is not going away. It's important. Congress has shown no signs of acting. Congress could not even get it together to pass an election deepfakes bill before this election. So California, as the heartland of tech and AI innovation, has a responsibility to lead on AI safety.
So, Senator, while this bill didn't pass, it did spark a national, even international conversation about AI legislation. What do you think the impact has been? Has it surprised you how big the debate over this bill became and how much it divided the tech community?
Yeah, I knew this bill would be controversial. Any tech regulation bill is. I did not anticipate the scale of the conversation. But I have to say, it's always disappointing when a bill fails or gets vetoed. But sometimes you have to introduce a big controversial bill to spark a long overdue conversation. I've seen that happen in some of the housing work that we've done, where you introduce a huge bill, it doesn't pass, but it moves the conversation forward. And I think the same is true here. The fact that the governor issued a very, very lengthy and detailed veto message, the fact that he acknowledged that the risks were real, and the fact that he committed to forming, not just forming a working group, but saying specifically who's going to be on it and what it's going to focus on, that's a big step forward. And so, yes, it's disappointing that this veto happened, but this issue isn't going away, and we're going to get the job done.
California Senator Scott Wiener, we thank you, and Bloomberg's Shireen Ghaffari. Now let's talk about SoftBank's Vision Fund planning to invest $500 million in OpenAI as part of a larger funding round, according to The Information, citing a source. Now, Bloomberg previously reported OpenAI is in talks to raise $6.5 billion from investors at a valuation of $150 billion. Representatives of OpenAI and SoftBank declined to comment. Coming up, Epic Games goes head-to-head against Google. More on the company's latest feud. This is Bloomberg Technology.
Apple's planning a renewed push into the smart home, including new software as well as major new devices. The new software will include HomeOS, a new operating system based on the Apple TV software that's run on the Apple TV set-top box for the better part of a decade. The idea here is to unify the software strategy for Apple's smart home appliances and link everything together, including HomePods, Apple TV boxes, and future hardware products for the home. The first major new home device in development from Apple is a new low-cost iPad-like smart display that can be used for FaceTime, watching video, home security, and of course, controlling smart home appliances. A later product will be a tabletop robot that can maneuver around on an actuating arm and follow a user around a room when they're giving commands or on a FaceTime call. This higher-end device likely won't launch for a few years after the low-cost smart display. I'm Mark Gurman. This is Power On.
Epic Games is expanding its antitrust fight with Google. Now, the gaming giant is accusing the Android parent with conspiring with Samsung, you got this, to block rival apps on its marketplace by default globally. For more, Bloomberg's Multi Nayak is here with it. And this is yet further antitrust fight with Alphabet, the parent company of Google, and of course the Android offering. What's at stake here for Epic?
So this is very interesting because, the fight is coming after last year's trial where Epic fought against Google's App Store policies, challenged them, and then won a jury trial where the jurors found that Google Play policies were anti-competitive. So now we have this new move, the latest move, where Epic says that while Google, a judge in the Google case, is figuring out remedies on how to fix Google Play policies, Google wants Samsung to sort of block gamers from finding their games easily. So it's sort of an interesting sort of new effort, that's happening while a judge is actually about to rule any time on how to change Google Play policies to make them, less of a monopoly, which is what a jury found. A jury found last year that that the Google Play Store was a monopoly.
Samsung in July said all of its phones will have this default setting. They say it's basically to prevent malware. But ultimately, it blocks downloads of Android apps that compete with the Google Play Store. So what is Samsung saying that it's actually doing here? What does Google say that it's actually doing here, not constraining competition?
Sure. So the lawsuit was just filed this morning, and Samsung says this auto blocker feature that Epic says is now blocking gamers from downloading Epic games and Epic products is actually something that Samsung says users have an option to turn it on or turn it off. It's up to them. But according to Epic, in July, Samsung turned this feature into a default. There was a default setting after an update where now every time you turn on your phone, auto blocker is automatically on, so it's not up to the user anymore. And that's what Epic says is anti-competitive. So Samsung says, hey, users can still turn off this feature if they want. And we haven't heard from Google yet. The lawsuit was filed just this morning, so we're waiting to hear their response.
Yeah.
It should be interesting because this is sort of the next fight after a fight that is already ongoing. So it'll sort of be interesting to see what happens.
Representative from Google declined to comment, and we plan to vigorously contest Epic Games' baseless claims, so says Samsung. Malti Nayak, thank you so much for bringing us the latest in the antitrust fight. Meanwhile, that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. Do not forget to check out our podcast. You can find it on the terminal as well as online on Apple, Spotify, and Hyde. From New York, this is Bloomberg Technology.